We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our lives makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our exciting journey through the spread of Islam in the world. I'm Dr. Steph Keris, the one who has written The Forgotten Ottoman Heritage, which some of you hopefully have read, the author of other books, which I don't want to mention here, I don't want to waste our time, also a lecturer of several universities in Europe as well as in Africa. Alhamdulillah, I had the chance to travel around the world and to enjoy the part of being part of the Muslim, of a Muslim Ummah. Being a Muslim, belonging to the Ummah. And this is something that I think many of our brethren miss nowadays. They don't really feel that they are part of the Ummah. But if you look deeper into it, I think, alhamdulillah, this is something that still the Jews and the Christians are jealous of us. They don't have this. They don't have the Salamu Alaikum that we have. They don't have the understanding of the Tawheed. They don't have that you can go to any city in the world, just end up somewhere, go and find a Muslim, he will give you salam, he will direct you to the masjid, and you will feel being part of this ummah. It's amazing. It's amazing. Nobody has this. Giving you this feeling also is the understanding of our history. Now, we've come to the third episode already, and I hope that you have understood that we are traveling through time as well as through geographic locations. You have seen that the way that Islam spread from Mecca to Medina, from Medina to Abyssinia, to nowadays Ethiopia, Somalia, the Horn of Africa. We have seen also how Islam spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula within a couple of years. And we have seen also that Mecca became part of the Muslim world without any bloodshed. A very important point. As well as Abyssinia became part of the Muslim world, Abyssinians became part of the Ummah without any bloodshed. It's a very important point, because the enemies of Islam keep saying Islam spread through the sword. Islam was basically, the Muslims conquered the non-Muslim lands. Now, if we conquered the non-Muslim lands with our hearts, with the non-Muslim lands with our hearts, then mashallah, may it be like this. We didn't conquer it by sword. The Muslims who were refugees and arrived in Abyssinia did not conquer Abyssinia, and the ruler did not accept Islam because they put a sword or a gun on their head. No. He accepted Islam because he saw the truth in it, mashallah. And we have to realize that if we don't know this history, if we don't know this part of our history, then the enemies of Islam have an easy game with us. They can tell you, look how Islam spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula. Your prophet, as they say, your prophet just went and killed people, and like this, people accepted Islam, and God knows whatever they say. Now, we can prove them wrong. Of course, battles happened, as we have spoken about it, of course, but also because the Muslims had to protect themselves. Now, in this part, I would like to explore the spread of Islam from the Arabian Peninsula further into the area where we call Sham. In the Arabic terminology, we call it the Sham area. Now, what is the Sham area? Which are the countries that are part of the area which we call Sham? Now, of course, first of all, Syria. Syria and Lebanon, these are the most important countries, but also Palestine and Jordan. These are all countries that form the area of the Sham area. As we said, these nations, as they exist nowadays as countries, did not exist at that time. So there was no Jordan, there was no Palestine, there was no Lebanon and Syria at that time. That was the Sham area. Now, how did it spread there, and why did it spread there? Again, was it something that spread because of the Muslims conquering these countries, killing the Christians, and killing anybody who was living there? Because we should not forget, during that time, and we're talking about the 7th century, we're talking about the time of Rasulullah ﷺ and after his death, ﷺ, during that time, the Byzantine Empire was the biggest empire in the West, as well as the Persian Empire in the East. So the Byzantine Empire and the Byzantine Greeks were the ones who actually had conquered the Sham area, and for that reason there were quite some Christians living in these countries, as we just mentioned, in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and in Palestine. So the Muslims arriving there, especially under the rule of the Umayyads, who was the first dynasty to rule after the righteous caliphs between the time of 632 and 750. The Umayyads, 632, 750 to 750. This dynasty played an important role in the spread of Islam, especially in the nowadays Middle East, going up to North Africa, and even going up to nowadays Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula. All this within this short period of time, 632 to 750. During that time, which was the capital of the Umayyads, it was not Medina anymore. No, the capital changed, and it became Damascus. Damascus, nowadays capital of Syria. Syria, as I said, one of the most important countries in the Sham area, played such an important role that the Muslims decided to make this their capital after Medina. The Umayyads made Damascus their capital after Medina. Now, between 750 and up to the 13th century, it was basically the Abbasids ruling, who went further and exchanged Damascus for Baghdad. Baghdad, the Iraqi capital nowadays, became the capital of the Abbasids. So, during both dynasties, the Umayyads as well as the Abbasids, who were ruling over the Sham area, during that time, there were quite some Christian Arabs living in the Sham area, and basically at the beginning the majority. And the Muslims were the minority first. Now, this of course changed in the long run, but it did not change because the Muslims forced the Christian people who were living basically in the Sham area, the Christian Arabs. They didn't force them to become Muslims, not at all. Otherwise we wouldn't have any Muslims at all there. Until nowadays, we have a very, very big minority, not only in Syria, but also in Lebanon. Lebanon has a very, very big minority of Christians living there, as well as Jordan. So basically, Christians are still living in that part of the world, although they became majority Muslim countries during the Umayyads and the Abbasid time. But a very important point here, none of them were forced to accept Islam. None of them. And we have documents, we have non-Muslim writers who refer to history and tell you basically that during that area, during that time, during that era, the area of the Sham became Islamic simply because the people realized that tolerance and the acceptance of caliphs like Omar, Ali, Marwan, Al-Mansur. These are significant figures during the time of the Muslim rule in the Sham area, and they are the ones who made the Muslims feel proud, and they are the ones who gave reason to the Christian subjects to accept Islam. No other reason. In general, we have quite some sources talking about the tolerance that was there under Muslim rule, much more tolerant than the Byzantine Christian Greek Orthodox rulers of the time before. People realized that. And you know what? We have to start realizing it, that from now on you will hear it a lot. Anywhere the Muslims went after that, after the Sham area, anywhere the Muslims went after the Arabian Peninsula, Anywhere the Muslims were, they spread Islam, and not through the sword, and not with means of fighting. No. Anywhere they went, Islam was accepted by the population willingly because of the tolerance. And this is documented. Example, for people who do not want to believe me, there are the following sources that they can read. Sources by a Christian person called Assemani. And his book is De Catholicis Nestorianis. So whoever wants to read about this one can find out there. Then the Chronicon Ecclesiasticum by Bar Hebreus. Again, important books that are written about that time and where you can find out how the Muslims treated the Christian subjects in the Sham area. So basically, the Sham area was inhabited mainly by Arabs, but non-Arabs were also the people who accepted Islam, seeing the tolerance and realizing the way that they were treated by the Muslim rulers, especially under the Muslim caliphate of Omar, of Ali, of Marwan. Now, the Marwanids specifically, the dynasty of Marwan, they were also heavily dependent on non-Arabs to basically do the administrative work. So, administrative personnel. The dependence on non-Arabs, of course, changed a little bit the structure of having the elite being Arabs and Arabic speaking. But nonetheless, it is an important fact here to realize that the Arabs also themselves realized that Islam is also going to another people. It's not staying within the Arabs, mashallah, and Islam, of course, came also for the non-Arabs. It came for the world. So that's basically when people started realizing more and more that it came down for everyone. But inshallah, we'll speak about it after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah.
Welcome to Tech Talk. I'm your host, Omar Shear. This season of Tech Talk, we will focus specifically on the internet.
A student would type their paper, and instead of handing me a hard copy of their paper, they would upload it to this learning system, this e-learning system.
I have some great experience when it comes to technology, and in particular, internet technology. Call to action is something that we do in our day-to-day lives, and maybe we don't realize it. Now we want to discuss, after you have a product and you have a website and you have a way to communicate with your customers, which would be your email marketing system, now it's time to take the money from the customer.
The Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back. Now, we spoke about the Sham area. We spoke about an important country like Syria, Damascus, which became the capital of the Umayyads. After Medina, Damascus. After Damascus, the Abbasids made Baghdad their capital. Now, Syria played such an important role, and Damascus specifically played such an important role, that they realized, the Arabs realized also during that time, that Islam was not only there for the Arabs, but it was also there for the non-Arabs. Seeing that the structure at that time, the administrative personnel, was mainly non-Arabs, and many of them accepted Islam, and we should not forget it was under Byzantine rule before the Muslims came, so a lot of the Byzantine Greeks, or some of them at least, accepted Islam, yes. Palestine, another important country, what happened to them? What happened to Palestine during that time? Now, the most important city there, of course, was Jerusalem, was and still is Jerusalem, where the Masjid al-Aqsa was built, where we have to realize that the Byzantines had problems to give it up, of course, and within basically some years, by 636, Jerusalem, which was held by the Byzantines, became Muslim. The Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, the equivalent of the bishop, as we know him in the Anglican Church, the equivalent of him, the Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, Sophronius, who was himself an Arab, he was the one who agreed to surrender Jerusalem to Caliph Omar in person. So Caliph Omar was the one who received the key for Jerusalem, and Sophronius was the one who basically surrendered the city to the Muslims, realizing that it is better for them to be part of the Muslim Ummah, even if many Arabs accepted later Islam. It was better to have the Muslim rulers there than having the Byzantine Greeks. Because if you read sources, and there are quite some sources out there that you can find out yourselves, if you find out about the rule of the Byzantines in the world and in the Middle East, you will find out that they were quite cruel, and there was more intolerance and tolerance. And definitely later, when the Muslims came, the Christians realized that it was better to be under Muslim rule than to be under Byzantine Christian rule even. Now, the only thing that they had to agree with Caliph Omar was one and only thing: paying the jizya tax. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, nowadays we all pay taxes. And I'm sure we pay more taxes than the jizya tax was paid by that time. So I don't really think that it was a reason, as many Greeks say nowadays. Well, there were some Greeks who accepted Islam due to the reason for them to not pay the jizya. Well, if that was it was the reason to accept Islam, then I doubt it a bit, because everybody pays taxes. Nowadays we pay taxes, and I don't see anybody changing just not to pay a certain tax, you know. So I don't really think that this is the reason for people to accept Islam. I think that there is much more going behind it, and much more important, many important facts that speak about the tolerance of the Muslims, and even especially at that time. One incident that is known throughout the Muslim world is the incident of Omar, the Caliph Omar, refusing to make his salah in the Anastasis church. And he basically refused to do that, to make a salah, because he feared that the Muslims would disregard the treaty that happened between the Christians and himself and the Muslims, and they would confiscate the church for that reason. So what did he do? He basically decided to pray opposite the church. And nowadays, on this very spot, that's the Mosque of Omar, is built, and there it's still standing as a sign of his tolerance and wisdom. Now, we have to understand that Caliph Omar was a very wise caliph, a very wise person, a very wise Muslim, who saw that Muslims later, or even during his time, might misunderstand his act, you know, and he decided to rather make salah outside than in the church, although it was permissible. So he still decided to make a salah outside of the church in order to give the freedom to the Christians, instead of later having to basically give into a Muslim mob maybe that did not understand these acts. Now, the Umayyad caliphs of Damascus, the ones who ruled between the time of 632 and 750, were quite tolerant rulers. Especially the time of 661 and 750, you can see that the Muslims were in good term with the Christian subjects. There are again many sources talking about that specific time, mentioning that the Christians held important offices at the court of the Umayyads. You will find many Christians holding offices that were quite important, and being even employed by the administration to work within the Muslim country, within a Muslim state. As well as the Abbasid caliphs at Baghdad later, between the time of 753 and 1242, they also were the ones who accepted the Christians working at their court, accepted the Christians as equal partners, and gave them the right to worship freely. We can find quite some documents, as I mentioned before, and I will mention one again with regards to the tolerance of the Muslims in Syria, Palestine, in the Sham area. Bishop Arkalf was one who wrote De Locis Sanctis. And in this De Locis Sanctis, you can find, he describes, and I quote, reasonably pleasant living conditions of Christians in Palestine under Muslim rule. Again, he describes reasonably pleasant living conditions of Christians in Palestine under Muslim rule. Now, in the 9th century, Palestine was conquered by the Fatimid dynasty of North Africa, and we will come to talk about this specific dynasty as well, inshallah. And Palestine became once again a battleground as the various enemies of the Fatimids attacked them. Now, this specific area, the Sham area, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, this specific area played an important role during the time of the Muslims. The expansion of Islam was at its peak actually there also. The Arabian Peninsula, as well as going over to the nowadays Middle East, going over to the Sham area. That important, it was given so much importance basically that Damascus, the capital of Syria, became the capital of the Umayyads. This showed how the Muslims realized that from leaving the Arabian Peninsula, leaving the desert, going further into the west of the Middle East, going further into lands like Syria, Lebanon, up to, of course, later Egypt, they realized that indeed Islam becomes a world religion. Islam becomes a world deen. It becomes something much, much bigger than the way it started in Mecca and Medina only. Non-Arabs accept Islam. In the time of the Umayyads, for example, who fought heavily the Byzantines and who conquered, who took basically, who opened for Islam several Byzantine countries, these Umayyads showed tolerance, alhamdulillah, as we have seen, and this allowed the Christian subjects, under them many Byzantine and Greeks who accepted Islam also under the rule of the Umayyads. But not many things are known about them, simply because nowadays it seems to be something bad or a shame to accept Islam, especially when we're talking about that time, because they don't want to make it seem that Islam was a tolerant deen and still is a tolerant deen, mashallah. Now, we have to look into the lessons that we are taught by this specific phase of our history. We have to look into the tolerance that these rulers, the caliphs, have all shown. We have to understand that that's the way an Islamic state has to operate, and not forcing its subjects to accept a certain ideology, not forcing its subjects accepting Islam. You know, La ikraha fi din. The Quran tells us itself. Allah tells us in the Quran, La ikraha fi din. There is no force for religion. There is no. We don't have to force anybody to become Muslim, basically. So, because they will understand themselves if the heart is open. Allah is the one who plays with the hearts anyway. Jazakumullahu khair. Indeed, it's a pleasure introducing such an important phase of our history. It's a pleasure introducing the Islamic history to an audience which is all over the world. And I hope you understand how important it is that we introduce this very subject also to our children. Jazakumullahu khair again, and I wish to see you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our lives makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride. We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. chosen as part of the best of mankind. We spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our life.